I came back and bought the company with 11,500 dealers, as many as 8 million monthly unique shoppers. So a much bigger business in every respect, but only half as much revenue. So
Wow.
clearly something wasn't working. And I believe that's where the opportunity exists. I think that if TrueCar's value proposition is realized, there's no other way to go to market. If you're a dealer, there's no other way to go to market if you're a consumer.
Diana, very exciting. Our guest today is a serial entrepreneur in the automotive digital retail space, from carsdirect.com to Zag and TrueCar to Fair to Autonomy, back to TrueCar. Of course, we're talking about the one and only Scott Painter. Scott, welcome to Auto Titans.
Hi, Jamie. Thank you very much for having me.
I have to tell you, Scott, I'm super excited to have you. You're a legend in the auto industry. You were the one that digitized how cars could be sold online. And just as a younger individual, when I was reading about you, I would remember just hearing about how everybody had to do True Car at the time. I just remember when I was a consultant, I was going dealer to dealer to dealer, and I was basically saying, if you're not doing True Car right now, you're dumb, because this is the platform that how everybody is going to sell cars on. So you're a legend, and I'm super excited to have you.
Wow, you're very kind. Thank you.
Just to refresh the audience memory, just this past winter, backed by investors including AutoNation, Zurich North America, and PenFed Credit Union, Scott pulled together $227 million to buy back TrueCar, which he founded about 2 decades ago. Scott, why did you want to do that? And what's your plan to improve the business?
Well, I think that buying a car in 2026 is not a lot better than it was in 2016 or 2006. Frankly, I think that, um, consumers still have a very, very intimidating process in front of them when they go car shopping. I don't think that information is cogent, clear, or compelling in many cases. And so, TrueCar was really founded as a price discovery platform to help people shopping for a new car. And the reason we focused on new cars is because new cars are a commodity. They come off an assembly line, and every new car is like every other, sort of think of it like a blender. You know, um, they all have build codes, and every configuration of new car has an MSRP. And that MSRP is a financial anchor point to then be able to measure how much you can save. And that does not exist with used cars. Used cars, the name of the game in used car classifieds is variety. The name of the game in new car price is everything. If you're looking to save time and money, which is the TrueCar value proposition, we need to be able to present to you what a car costs, how to configure the car. And, we have two types of customers that come shopping at TrueCar: customers who know what they need. They're very upper funnel. I need an SUV. And then we have customers who tend to be very low funnel. I want a Ford Explorer, Eddie Bauer, certain color combination. Um, and those are two very different customers. But price discovery really helps that upper funnel customer understand, what, maybe you live in Los Angeles and you don't need four-wheel drive, and you had no idea that four-wheel drive is a $4,000 option. And whether it's four-wheel drive or the moonroof or leather or nav, I mean, all sorts of different things cost different amounts. This is where not just providing a VIN-based listing, which is always going to give you a subset of vehicles available at particular dealers in a very seller-oriented manner. TrueCar was always built predominantly for consumers, and we were a venture-backed startup that ultimately went public. And so having our priority focused on the customer meant that we served dealers by helping customers to save time and money when buying a car. And when I left TrueCar in 2015, the company had about a million monthly unique shoppers. It had just about 2,000 dealers nationally and nearly 400 million in revenue. Um, I came back and bought the company with 11,500 dealers, as many as 8 million monthly unique shoppers. So a much bigger business in every respect, but only half as much revenue. So
Wow.
clearly something wasn't working. And I believe that's where the opportunity exists. I think that if TrueCar's value proposition is realized, There's no other way to go to market if you're a dealer. There's no other way to go to market if you're a consumer. When TrueCar 1.0, I had to convince investors that the internet was going to be a big deal. Obviously, we're on the event horizon of artificial intelligence, which is threatening to change how dealers do everything, how consumers do everything. And I think there's a lot of fear about that. And I just recognized all of that as change, and change to an entrepreneur means opportunity. But I think great entrepreneurs, great companies solve a problem. My problem has been buying and owning a car is time consuming, frustrating, high anxiety for most people. And so I think there's a lot of unfinished business.
I know we want to get to AI, but I do want to talk a little more about TrueCar as it is. When you started out, it really was closely tied with affinity groups like USAA, and it sounds like that's still a big part of your business. Are you trying to find more groups? Are you trying to get better penetration within the groups? What's the plan there?
Well, there's really two reasons that we went with affinity marketing as our angle. Um, every company has an origin story. TrueCar's origin story started with I came out of the military. I went to West Point and I ended up coming to Cal Berkeley as a rugby player. And when I got to Cal, even though I was at West Point, I was in the military. You get paid as a student to go to West Point. You're sort of a third lieutenant. But when I got to Cal, all of a sudden, I'm, a student, and I had no apparent source of income. But I did love cars. I've had a lifelong love affair with cars. I could tell you everywhere I was at in my life based on what I was driving at the time. And within 2 or 3 months of getting to Cal, I had very quickly become known as everybody's friend in the car business. If you were looking to buy a car, people came to me. And it's a really important thing to understand. My mom, when she introduces me, still says my son is a car salesman. And the truth is, I was an auto buyer. And it's really important to understand the difference between buying a car for people and selling them a car is night and day. So when I would get introduced to a friend as their friend in the car business, that introduction came with immediate trust and zero assumption that I was there to sell them anything. I was there to take the order and go out and get them the best deal, be their advocate, like a personal shopper. I
Hmm.
was operating under brokering law, but what it gave me is a real appreciation for the challenges of buying a car. So all of my insights into auto retail come from the buy side, the consumer side of the table. Everything I know about how a dealership operates comes from navigating the dealership as a broker. And so the origin story at TrueCar was really about recognizing that the goodwill that we get by being related to these affinities is the same as the goodwill that I got as a referral from a trusted friend. There was no opposition, no defensiveness, no resistance to me helping that customer, that person get a car. I was there to help them save time and money. And so that's where it really started. But what we learned is that not all affinities are created equal. There are really four transactions that occur when somebody buys a car. Not only are you wanting to get a good deal on the car, you're also wanting to make sure you get a good trade because most people have to trade in the car they're currently driving. They can't have two cars in the driveway at the same time. They can't finance two cars at the same time. And then the third is 94% of people do not pay cash for their car. And then finally, everybody by law has to insure the car they're driving on public roads. So if you don't solve the purchase of a car, the trade-in of a car, the financing of a car, and the insurance of that car, you're leaving the customer to have to fend for themselves. And so what we recognize is that the natural on-ramp to buying a car is somebody applying for a car loan, for example. You don't apply for a car loan on a car you don't own if you don't intend to go buy that car. And
Mhm.
so when we first looked at our affinity partnerships and force ranked them based on relevance, auto finance companies, auto insurance companies, but USAA, for example, which was both an auto lender and an auto insurer. If a customer came to USAA and said, I want to apply for a car loan and I'd like an insurance quote on that car, the likelihood that the customer was going to go buy that car was very, very high. And you compound that with the goodwill of USAA being a trusted advisor to their members. And what you found is that almost half of everybody we introduced to a dealer bought a car. So it's no longer the business of lead generation. It's no longer the business of simple marketing. It is about an auto buying program. And that is the origin story. That's where it got started. That's why it was so successful. It was also the secret to having a low customer acquisition cost.
Mhm.
CAC is the thing that kills almost all businesses. Everybody has to deal with their customer acquisition cost at some level. But CAC for TrueCar was always low because we worked as an affinity auto buying program that they served up to their members as a trusted resource to help them save time and money. And that's the whole bargain.
And so are you trying to expand that now, or are you just getting back to basics? What's the plan within those affinity groups?
We're getting back to basics and then expanding. So I've
Okay.
got a three-part strategy to the acquisition. So whenever you raise hundreds of millions of dollars to do a thing, you got to then first toe the line and show that you can operate with discipline. This company has been adjusted EBITDA break even for the last 6 years, which is
Wow.
basically public company shenanigans for losing $2.5 to $3 million a month for 6 years. And whenever this company needed money because it was public, it could go and do a secondary offering very quietly, dilute the shareholders a little bit, and put some cash on the balance sheet. I bought the company for 237 million, but we had about 107 million dollars of cash on balance sheet, which meant that I really paid about 120 million for a company that was generating 175 million of top line revenue. So about zero point 0.6 times revenue. I think we stole the company, but it's because the company was not growing and not profiting. There's only three variables that go into enterprise value for any business: top line, bottom line, and growth. The company was not growing, it was not profitable. And as a result, it had very little value. I mean, we bought the company for just above book value. And my job, number one, my strategy, number one, is come in, rationalize the size of the business, get out of some lines of business that were not core, and show that we could actually turn a cash flow operating profit. So we took over the company on January 20th.
Yeah.
We posted our first ever operating profit for the first
Wow.
quarter of 2026. We posted a just over $5.7 million gross operating profit. It was a massive reversal of loss to gain, and it just came by way of doing the hard stuff, right? The blocking and tackling, the discipline of coming in and rationalizing the organization from just under 400 employees to just over 200, getting out of three lines of business: TrueCar Plus, TCMS, and TrueCar Wholesale, that were not core to what we do, and realigning everybody on the core mission of saving people time and money. My
Wow.
bigger problem is really the second phase. Um, One of the nearly 400 employees that I interviewed when I first came in, I said, I'm not going to let anybody go until I meet everybody. And I think everybody thought I was trying to meet everybody to figure out who to let go. And actually, I was trying to figure out who not to let go. But I came in and I put sort of a hard line around 75 humans and said that would be undesirable attrition if we lost this person. I was looking for alignment. Almost everybody was extraordinarily competent and very, very switched on. They just weren't necessarily aligned to the mission. And once I identified who was aligned, I protected those people. We rationalized the size of the business. We are now operating profitably and consistently. We'll post another similar profit for the second quarter of this year. So everything's on track there. However, not one of the employees would have referred a friend. Not one.
Wow.
And to me, that's the problem. Our prospect in market shopper to prospect conversion ratio is less than 5%, which means that less than 5% of the people who come to the website shopping for a car actually raise their hand and become a prospect and get introduced to a dealer. That to me was how broken the business was. The fact that it monetizes that 5% effectively enough to have a business was astonishing to me. What we are doing right now is fixing the product. So we've already turned the company around financially, and that's just operating with discipline and a smaller workforce. And what we are doing is fixing the product, making sure that more of our consumers who shop become prospects, and they do it for the right reasons. That is a longer fix. It will probably take another quarter to get us through that turn in the river, but I will not scale the business until the engine is working properly. We need to have at least 15% of our shoppers turn into prospects. And right now it's less than 5%. So I need a almost 4 to 5x improvement in the shopper to prospect conversion ratios. And that's a byproduct, a reflection of a product that works. We will get there as quickly as we can, but that is by far the harder effort and the trickier thing to do in turning this company around. I'm certain we can do it. It is about going back to basics and the original core value proposition of how much money can we save you, and predominantly on a new car. And then from there, it's about really scaling this business in a very big way. I believe this business by 2028 can be $1 billion of top line revenue and a
Wow.
25 to 45% margin contribution business. So I believe it's a very profitable business. Um, we are already operating with great margins again. And what we are going to be focused on is, again, fixing the product. Once we fix the product, it will be more affinity groups and more of the things that scale the revenue line.
I love that. So, Scott, let me ask you, what made you decide that you really wanted to come back to TrueCar? Because I know that you're the CEO of Autonomy and you are having great success there as well. But what made you just make that decision wanting to come back?
I think companies are like kids. I've got 4 kids. I've had 57 incorporations.
Wow.
I've taken 3 companies public. I've had about a dozen exits. To me, TrueCar is, something that I brought into existence. I believe in its potential. Um, it's not a startup. TrueCar has the ability to go from where it's at today to $1 billion in revenue in 2 years. That's a pretty remarkable statement. It's no longer a startup. And for those reasons, I mean, I believe it represented a significant opportunity, especially as a founder who understood the product, who understood what's possible. And I've been watching how the car market has evolved, and I don't think that shopping for a car has necessarily gotten better. I think companies like Carvana, for example, have really redefined what's possible, but they've done it for a lightning strike in used cars around their brand. Tesla has done it for them and for their brand, but I don't think the industry itself has cracked the code at all. And I believe there's a tremendous opportunity to do so. There was a very real concern in TrueCar 1.0 that we were creating a race to the bottom. The truth is that if you're a new car retailer, you're selling an appliance that comes off of an assembly line. And if you advertise that product for sale against other retailers that are selling the exact same product, you are in a race to the bottom. It doesn't have anything to do with TrueCar. Um, we just weren't prepared, I think, to answer that question in a really good way at the time. Um, it wasn't TrueCar's fault per se. We certainly created an opportunity at scale for consumers to engage auto retail and to get product information in a way they had never gotten it before. I think that that same opportunity exists today, but the truth is, TrueCar was never about getting the absolute lowest price no matter what. TrueCar is about getting a fair price and getting a price you can believe in and feel good about. And so, the vibe today that I think matters is that, the dealers that are thriving are the dealers that do understand customer happiness and delivering a great experience to that customer. Using the data that we have, we can actually help dealers to retain gross and optimize velocity by understanding that while price matters, it's not the only dimension that consumers are thinking about. Consumers are also thinking about convenience, proximity, perfect match, whether or not the dealer offers great service. All of those dimensions go into understanding where they're going to buy their car from because they have lots of choices.
Yeah, but Scott, now with I think there's a new fear, right? That dealers are bringing up and they're afraid AI is about to take their business. What would you say to them about that?
Well, it's interesting. I was just the keynote speaker at a automotive marketplace conference in Barcelona this last week, and
Nice.
pretty much all of the attendees were either management, investors, or entrepreneurs in the automotive marketplace business. And these are businesses that predominantly around the world are using inventory as a way of going to market. And the problem with using inventory as a way to go to market is it means that everything you do to engage consumers needs to be about increasing time on site, retention, engagement. It is a very seller centric model. Everyone was talking about AI. And I spoke at the very end of the conference. It was a 3-day conference, and I was the keynote at the very end, and everybody stuck around. I was glad that I was at the end because I got to hear what everyone else had to say, and I sort of got the last word. But it was very clear there's a massive misunderstanding of what artificial intelligence is. Artificial intelligence is pattern recognition and predictive analytics based on standardized data and understanding what's likely to happen, not exactly what's going to happen, but it's about helping to improve the quality of your decisions. And
Yeah.
so, what most of these automotive classified marketplaces think an AI does is help them to optimize who to go after, how to engage them, and how to make the advertising more compelling, more sticky, if you will. Um, it's a very seller centric model. But what's interesting about this term agentic AI is that agentic AI is about serving the buyer, not the seller. And, you know, the fact that I had just completed the acquisition of TrueCar allowed me to basically say, look, I'm not just telling you as a group that I think search is dead and that it peaked 3 years ago and that all of your KPIs are going to continue to head in the wrong direction, whether it's the size of your dealer network, the population of your consumers, the length of their engagement, their close rates, all of these things are going to head in the wrong direction because nobody needs 4 million listings. Consumers want 3 answers to a question. They want to know what is the right choice. And where AI can be helpful is to sift through 4 million pieces of information and understand based on the different dimensions of a transaction, the trade in, the down payment, the monthly payment, all of these different elements, what is a fair deal? What is the best savings? And those kinds of insights are perfect for a complex problem like automotive. And it's a great place for agentic AI to serve consumers. But the fallacy is that doesn't mean that it can't serve the dealers. It just has to serve the consumer first. Um, the fact that I was a venture backed business looking to go public at TrueCar in 2008, 9, 10, and then ultimately in 2014 is a very similar analogy in that if we didn't disrupt on behalf of the consumer, we wouldn't have a brand or a value proposition that resonated with people. And that's the only way that we're able to serve the dealers in the network that are playing ball. The problem with most automotive retail efforts are they start with an industry first perspective saying, how can we help the dealer? How can we help the OEM? How can we help the industry to sell more efficiently, more effectively? Not how can we help the consumer? And that is where I think there's this massive disconnect. And so it was provocative to say what I said to, the conference that search is dead and that they've misunderstood what agentic AI is. But it really, the epiphany is it's okay. Serve consumers. In doing so, you serve your dealer partners and your OEM partners because they sell more cars, they have better engagement, and they have lower customer acquisition cost, more customers and less friction.
Oh, I'm just curious, AutoNation is such an important partner for TrueCar as it was before. I'm wondering how is it different working with AutoNation under Mike Manley compared with Mike Jackson's AutoNation a decade ago?
Well, we don't want to turn this into days of our lives. I think that Mike Manley is a really switched on leader. He, first of all, understands where auto retail is going and how it's evolving. He runs a phenomenal organization. This is a guy who really knows what he's doing. I think that Mike and I share a vision that a balanced ecosystem that serves both dealers and consumers is the only way to move forward. I think that he understands that we are moving into a fully transparent world. AutoNation lives within that world today, so none of this is news to him. I think that there are, legacy parts of any organization, but leadership is what matters. And so I think, AutoNation under Mike Manley is a phenomenal organization. I think it's undervalued in the marketplace. I think they have more capability than people realize. I think that if you think about sort of their power to weight ratio, it's way better than organizations even like Carvana. They
Hmm.
are really a remarkably broad and deep organization that has a lot of capability. They're very much interested in learning what we have in the form of insights around pricing, but the reason that AutoNation leaned into this transaction is because when I sat down with Mike Manley, I said, look, this is not about trying to force you to discount to sell more cars. This is about understanding the empirical tipping point between the optimization of velocity of sales and front end gross margin retention. And by the way, that is not inconsistent with helping the consumer to save time and money. There is a belief that I have that in the future, the selling price of a new car will be an empirical thing. It will not be the dealer who is more aggressive that is able to sell the car a higher percentage of the time. Largely, it'll be about availability of product and convenience to the consumer and service. The non commoditized parts of the transaction, things that are not the car itself. Again, think of the car as a blender. It comes in a box. You can have a blue one or a red one. You don't ask for a VIN number on the blender. You ask for the blue one or the red one. And whether it's a certain trim level or a color, it doesn't really matter. A new car is a new car is a new car. There will be a market clearing price for new cars. The dealers that win are the dealers that will have a lower cost structure, a more efficient CAC, and a higher non-commoditized service line of revenue, whether that is servicing the vehicles, maintaining the vehicles, managing trades. Those are all non-commoditized dimensions of dealer operations today.
Do you believe that to be the same for whether it's a Toyota, Honda, or a Highline vehicle, like a BMW?
All these brands are unique. Certainly, you have some brands that are trying to enforce MAP pricing around MSRP. And what they're really trying to do is hide the fact from consumers that the market behaves in a rational way. Supply
Yeah.
and demand is a real thing. Irrespective of what Mercedes might say or allow a dealer to say about MSRP, consumers buy cars well below MSRP, Mercedes vehicles well below MSRP all the time.
Okay.
So the truth is that it's just a worse experience the more rules are applied to how free markets are allowed to behave. Transparency is helpful. So even though a Mercedes dealer might not be able to advertise an MSRP, they can certainly communicate an offer of one that represents a discount through TrueCar in a way that doesn't give them a moral hazard or jeopardize their advertising map requirements. And so I think that you have to deeply understand how these markets work and the rules of engagement here. We do more than just about anybody. We spent so much time and energy and effort and legal resources understanding, the state and national laws around auto retail, auto finance, auto insurance, and we're compliant across the board.
I'm curious what you're seeing in the market now in terms of consumer behavior with 450 gasoline, $100 oil. I noticed on the TrueCar.com homepage, the first three buttons are new, used, or hybrid. Uh, are you seeing a lot more interest in hybrids lately? Is that why that's a top screen button?
That's exactly why. So, we are a reflection, a mirror of how these markets are behaving. I think that the truth is, for a minute, it was new, used, and EVs. And, right now, EVs are sort of being swept under the rug a little bit based on, the fact that incentives for EVs have largely gone away. And there's a lot of concern about residual pricing, residual values, and residual value setting on EVs. Harder to get an electric vehicle loan than it ever has been. So there's a bunch of structural things that we're always going to reflect how that market behaves. But um, in the end, we're moving much more towards the ability to detect what you're in the market for than rather than forcing you to have to identify what you want. You might not know yet. Our belief is that the primary angle of attack for us is price. We're about price discovery, price transparency, upfront pricing, guaranteed savings, and making sure you can lock that in. And that's what makes us unique. I mean, we want to get to the point where you can honestly say, if you didn't buy your next car from TrueCar, you probably overpaid.
I have a
It's like
question
exactly.
for you, Scott. Um, how does this affect autonomy?
Autonomy is, running in parallel. It is a very, very real business. Subscriptions work. What we learned is that electric vehicles are a good bet. They're very durable. Consumers under the subscription model pay their bills. You cannot get a car any other way where you pay for it on your credit card. You cannot pay a car loan or a car lease with a credit card because you can't pay debt with debt. So autonomy and the subscription billing model are very, very compelling. We believe there's a great future there. We'll probably broaden out from just focusing on electric cars like we have in the past. As you know, autonomy got started by offering almost exclusively Teslas. We started to add BMWs,
Oh, wow.
Polestars, and a number of other vehicles. So you can now go to autonomy, but autonomy has its own sort of life, and it is a real thing, and it does very well.
Well, we look forward to keeping in touch and hearing how all your companies are performing. Scott Painter, thank you so much for joining us, TrueCar's founder, and again, its CEO.
Great. Thanks,
Thank you
Jamie.
so much,
Thanks,
Scott.
Diana.